DealQuest listeners and viewers, I am so excited to have Martin Harshberger on an upcoming episode of DealQuest. His background in manufacturing, deal with big companies, and the coaching and consulting he does now is really invaluable when it comes to deals and systemizing growth. Martin, can you tell our audience what they're going to hear about on your upcoming episode of DealQuest?
Well, several things, I think. One, I'm focusing on trying to get companies ready for transition. And part of transitioning is repeatability and developing repeatability and predictability in the business and how we do that. I have a framework put together to allow companies to look at the business as a whole entity and increase the value for them and allow them to see reward for their effort.
And I know, from our pre-interview that, you've had some past experiences that have really, helped you bring value to your clients. Give us just a little taste of so some of the history people are going to hear about on the episode.
Well, I started a company in Memphis back in 90, value-added logistics company. And we grew that fast enough that we made the Inc. 500 in the 7th year. Some of our customers were Apple, Compaq, HP, American Express, some marquee names. It's an opportunity for a small company to partner with a large company is invaluable if you could find value to offer them.
Love it. And I know we're also going to talk about, let's say, lessons learned from raising capital as well. So look out for Martin's episode coming up on DealQuest.
Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started.
As CEO, Martin Hershberger has scaled 2 companies to 8 figures. As a small business owner, he's sold to Apple, HP, and American Express, to name a few. He has spent the last 16 years consulting to $5 million to $50 million businesses. Today, Martin is helping business owners and CEOs prepare for a successful transition by developing and executing a strategy that provides the basis for repeatable and profitable growth. Most change initiatives fail because they offer partial solutions. Martin has developed a framework to ensure all functions of the organization are in sync and in position to support the strategy. Martin, welcome to the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I mean, I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation because these repeatable processes. People underestimate sometimes how much more enterprise value you can build when you have systems and processes and repeatable income. And, I recently had Joel Block on an episode where he does this trend report. And one of the things he's talked about is the move towards subscription, which is just a form of repeatable income, right? And right. Obviously with a subscription, you need to have a model, and that's and processes that are repeatable as well. And companies that have that recurring revenue are certainly worth more. So I'm looking forward to digging into all that and what you do now with consulting to entrepreneurs and growing companies. But before we do all that, I want to take you back to when you were growing up as a little kid, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is consulting to growing companies about their processes and systems was likely not it, but you tell me.
I wanted to be a ball player like everybody else. I played a lot of baseball, but that was it. That's what I wanted to be. But things don't work out, right?
And what and what team were you? Did you imagine yourself playing for?
Well, I was always a Red Sox fan. I grew up in Pittsburgh, but I was always a Red Sox fan. So
wow.
I guess my dad was a Ted Williams fan, so that kind of rubbed off on me.
Oh, got it. Interesting. So you must have taken some guff from your Pittsburgh friends, being
not too much. I never got much of a team over there. So.
I love it. So I know we talked about it in your bio a little bit, but just give us, give us 30 seconds or a minute in terms of, the kind of clients you work with and what you're doing now. And then I want to jump into the deal related conversation.
Okay. Primarily industrial service and manufacturing and supply chain.
Yep.
To me, the supply chain and manufacturing is synonymous. You have to learn to work with the suppliers, and the suppliers have to work with you to create value in the chain. So I kind of focus on that.
Yeah, great. And that's, so we mentioned some of the companies, that you've worked with. So, I'm just, in terms of your journey, actually, before we even get to deals, I'm curious as to what had you make that transition from working in corporate, to being a consultant?
Well,
and having your own business.
One is I was with a mainframe computer company. And when I went to headquarters, I don't remember what year it was now, but we had about 66,000 employees. We're a $4 billion company. And you know what happened to mainframes. So when I left, it was still, I don't know, we were about $2 billion company. We were about cut in half. My years as an executive there was pretty much downsizing and meeting numbers, so it wasn't fun. But one of the things I did for them, I did some turnaround stuff. So that's one reason I moved every couple of years. And the last thing I did was a logistics problem. They had a national or global, actually, but I solved it with consolidating parts in Memphis with FedEx and did some stuff with that. And I thought, everybody's got this problem. So we put together a business plan, a partner and I, who was with the company as well, and went out and raised funding. And sure enough, we launched it.
Great. All right. So you mentioned in that at least two types of deals. One is a business partnership deal. You had a partner, and two is you raised some capital. So talk to me a little bit. Obviously, you don't have to reveal anything confidential, but in terms of sort of anything about how those deals came down, what you learned, lessons from being in a business partnership and from raising capital.
Well, I'll be honest. I was so naive raising capital. I couldn't have picked worse partners. I mean, it's a true statement. I had a private group out of Florida and a medical group out of Memphis. They put in less than $1 million in cash, and then primarily guaranteed debt. So my balance sheet, I always had negative net equity.
Yes.
So I'm selling to American Express and Apple and Compaq with a negative balance sheet. So I had a lot of convincing to do, but I had to sit down with their senior management and say, okay, here's what we look like. So it was an issue. The other thing we agreed on the front end, where they gave me a lecture. They say founders always get attached to the business. We want to cash out in 5 years, and I was fine with that. That was my strategy, 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
Well, we had 5 offers to buy the business, and they wouldn't accept any of it because
Wow.
it was totally backwards on me. Then we had some pretty good years, and my concern was a lot of my revenue was repair refurb based. For example, I handled all the returns for Apple North America, and we repackaged, refurbed it, and sold it as used, that kind of thing. And knowing that the cost of electronics falls, having just come out of the mainframe business, I knew that we had a narrow window, right? And we had some great offers, but they wouldn't take it. So how did that work out? Not so well. I did okay because I cashed out. They wanted to go in to do a dotcom to actually buy inventory from manufacturers that they couldn't sell and try to sell it on the internet, which it just wasn't a good idea.
Wow.
Manufacturers didn't want to own inventory. Why would we want to own it?
So they just they thought the business was worth more than the offers that you got at that time?
Yeah, I mean, 4 or 5 years in, we had a $20 million offer, and their answer was, "It'll be worth $100 million in 5 years." So we couldn't satisfy it. So how did that deal turn out? I mean, I'm a lot wiser now. We could have had something in writing about what our expectations were. The return on their investment was phenomenal if they had just taken it, but they wouldn't take it. So
and they lived to regret it. It sounds like.
Yeah, they did. And I knew they were going to, because my contact with computer. I'll give you an example. Walking through a warehouse one day with an Apple VP, I had to add 75,000 feet to my warehouse. I had a 500,000 foot warehouse just for Apple, and he made a comment. He said, "What do you see on your shelves?" I said, "Computers." He said, "No, I see bananas. They spoil 7% a month." Nobody wanted to own it, so they were actually buying it from them and trying to sell on the internet, because they got into this I was right at the end of the dot-com bubble, and they thought they could put .com at the end of the name, they'd all get rich, but it didn't work out that way.
Well, and I guess, I mean, listen, I remember those days, and there was some stupid valuations going on for crazy things back then. So until of course it all, it all burst. But yeah, so they had an inflated view. It's interesting. I mean, I've been practicing law for 35 years plus now, and I remember those times, and I had some clients that made stupid money and got out when I have a good friend of mine who's been a client of mine for many, many years now, 3 businesses. And I remember his business then, he made a ridiculous amount of money, never had a profit. And the business that he's run since is highly profitable and will never, sell for those multiples.
Yeah, no, that's right. It was nothing underpinning those multiples for sure. And that's what got these guys. They saw what was happening and they said, well, we've got a track record. And it just didn't work. And I saw that and got out. My partner got out after a year in. He had some medical issues. So I was about 9 years without him, but he did okay as well.
Good. And any lessons? Had you been in business partnerships before, or was this your first business partnership? Or
that was the first one. Other than working with, I worked with this guy for 7 or 8 years. So I knew him pretty well. We had complementary skills. He was more administrative and IT, which our value proposition was IT, so it was a great fit. And I was more operational and sales, so it was a good fit for us.
Makes sense. So it sounds like that was a good partnership. Obviously, he had some issues and how to get out, but that was unrelated to the partnership. But it sounds like it was So any lessons, positive and negatives, particularly in terms of business partnerships that you had that experience or any other experience?
We had an understanding between us of what we wanted. We both stuck to that, but didn't, we had an agreement with them relative to financing, but we had a verbal understanding, but not a written. We should have, looking back, if we had documented that, we had all been
right with your VCs, but with your partner, it was good. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And any other, before we get into, because I do want to get into the meat of what we're going to be talking today about, which is sort of what you do that actually helps, companies position themselves for sale. And even if they don't sell, it puts them in a better position as well. But any other past, experience with any, other types of deals that sort of have informed, what you do for clients now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the last things I did for the company I was with is I was one of the team of 3 to shut down their supercomputer division. And I negotiated settlements with 300 vendors. So wow. I learned a lot about negotiation there. But when I got my own company, we had some really rapid growth, which is good and bad.
Right.
I'm trying to keep up with it. But what did it was the partnerships or strategic partnerships we had with marquee name companies.
Yes.
The first company we signed was Amex. We took care of all the credit card terminals worldwide, I guess. I don't know. They were a tough customer in the logistics industry. They had some particular requirements, and we met those. And once we had that, and then with Apple and some of the others that followed on, we traded on their name rather than mine.
Sure.
Which was a lot better.
So getting that first strategic partner, or alliance, or is always the toughest one, right? Especially at that level, those kind of names. How did you have a relationship there? How'd you get in there? How'd you land the first one?
We had what we did. FedEx had a logistics organization at the time that competed with us, believe it or not. And we came into town, but we had the technical skills and we had an IT system that we could tie into FedEx's system. So from the time I took a part off the shelf in a warehouse, I would print 2 air bills, one to ship it out and one to track it coming back. My system would track it and look out. And after 3 days, I didn't see the air bill in the FedEx system. We had customer service call and say, look, send it back or you bought it type thing. Because what we were selling was pipeline management. And by getting it back and refurbing it and get it on the shelf, we were able to reduce our inventory significantly.
Wow.
Like for Amex, I think it was something like 60%. We were over 10 years, we were able to reduce the inventory by that much. We did complete work, refurb on it and put it back on the shelf. So they were looking at 7 to 10 days versus 2 to 3 months doing it internally. So what we had was that everybody wanted to do it. They looked at the system. We had some demos and that kind of thing, but they were scared to death of us because we were new in our balance sheet. So somebody had to be first. So the first one was the toughest. Once the first one got in, it got a little bit easier.
And how did you land that first one? What was it? Just great sales? Was it connections? Was it,
Yeah, I mean, it was just straight sales. We made many trips to Phoenix and then into us. They liked the system. They talked to the investors. Had to get them together to say, yeah, they're gonna back us, that kind of thing. And the other thing was, to be honest, I sent them to FedEx to see what they could do, and I knew they couldn't do what we were doing. So even though I was one of FedEx's biggest shippers at the time, I was really a competitor with the logistics side. So, but I usually send people there when they coming into Memphis. I'd say, "Are you going to FedEx too?" And they say, "Yeah." I said, "Well, go there first." So they come back in. So we relied pretty much. We had a good value proposition. I understood the problem very well from the big company that I worked for. I understood how it worked out in this bigger industries, and I understood how I could shrink that pipeline. So I had to push back on that.
I'll tell you, I don't think there are many people who can say that to actually land a big client as a competitive advantage, they actually send people to FedEx. I don't know how many people can say that, Martin. You may be the only one that I know.
Well, I knew it was there. I wouldn't do it today. I'm sure they're well advanced today than where we were at the time. But at the time, they were really they tried to trade on the name of the overnight freight, which is awesome to be, no question about it, which is why we used them. But their logistics was really just storage. They weren't adding any value with the turns or anything like that. So I knew that, and I thought I'd go compare it. So it was a selling point for us.
Love it. Okay, so now you've taken all this experience that you had at these big companies, helping them grow, dealing with downsizing and negotiating and all these things. And now, you start your own consulting firm and you work with companies to help them, systemize, et cetera. So talk to us a little bit more about what you do, and also just how that, benefits the company. And for me, I mean, this is not, anybody who does this understands that the things you do that create systems and create things to be repeatable and recurring income and all that kind of stuff helps you in terms of current cash flow and profit, and also, helps the value of the company. So it's, even if you never sell, it makes sense no matter what your plan is, but it certainly helps on the back end as well.
When I tell people, the company always has to be ready to sell, whether you want to sell it or not, because it gives you options with financing and a lot of other things. So, I mean, I had a client a few years back that used to ride cycles. He was a government contractor. So when he got the contract 5 years, he was fat, and then he would cycle through it. And he said, he made a comment, I'll never forget it. He said, I want to sell my company. Nobody wants to buy it. Because he's trying to sell in a downturn. I said, no, the value is somewhere else, right? So what if I go in and talk and look at companies, and I've looked at a lot of them over my years. Number one, most people don't have a transition plan in their mind.
Yes.
They might have a vague idea that someday they want to go fishing in Florida or something, but so they don't prepare themselves or their company for them to transition.
Yes.
By that I mean the business, typically your founder, the business resides on your ability. So somebody comes in, and I've done this, M&As, come in and talk to someone, and I look at the business and I say, the business is you. So if I buy it, you've got to stay here and right. Work for me. And which is, they don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. And part of that is they don't do a holistic look at the business itself. When you're emotionally attached to a business, you don't see things that somebody like me can see. I walk in and say, God, why are you doing this? And there's usually an answer, but it's not necessarily a good one. But what I do is try to address the fact, like I call it repeatable business development. What it is strategic planning. But people don't like strategic planning. Why? Because they don't execute it. So right. What I talk about is do you want to have more predictability in your business? Do you want to have it repeatable, that kind of thing? And we take a hard look at where they are, or hard look at where they want to go first. I start with that, and I start with the CEO.
Yeah.
And where do you want to be in 10 years personally? And he, sometimes he knows, sometimes a lot of times he doesn't. And we'll talk through that. And I'll say, okay, what does a business have to deliver to you in the event of a transition for you to realize that lifestyle? And then we go through that. I said, well, look where you're at. It's not going to do that. If you're running on $1 million EBITDA right now, you got $1 million cash. But if you're running $1 million EBITDA 5 times after taxes and cost of the deal, you're looking at $2 million. You invest that today, what are you getting? 100 grand or 120 grand a month or a year. So It's a big shift. So I try to make them understand that. So okay, how do we build that value? So then we look at where they are now at every aspect of the business. And we put together a strategy that says, okay, here's your weaknesses, here's your strengths. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's block and tackling.
Yep.
People don't do it. If people have a sales problem, they'll bring in some marketing or sales guy and say, okay, I've got to attack my sales. And the question I ask them is, why sell more if you're not making any money on what you're selling right now? Because you've got waste in your process, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's just a deep dive on the business. And what I do differently, I guess, than most is I do a retainer-based thing where I become an accountability coach. It says once a month we sit down and say, look, guys, you told me when to do this.
Right.
Where are we now? What are the obstacles? What can we do to keep it in front of it? And I found some success with that.
So what are the characteristics of, because I'm sure no matter how great you are at what you do, you have some folks that aren't successful because you've given them bad advice or whatever, but because they haven't taken action or followed your advice or whatever, and then you have them show plenty that do. What do you see the main difference between the folks that are able to implement and take your advice versus the ones that I assume a smaller percentage, but
ability to execute. And where I've made a pact with myself. Now I don't deal with family businesses. And the reason I don't deal with family businesses is don't hire somebody you can't fire who's not carrying their weight. Right? Because I've run into that,
Yes.
where I can look at it and say, half the staff is expendable and you're not making any money, but we can't get rid of it. So the other is I try to personalize it. Say, look, this is what you wanted. This is what you've earned over your period of time. This is where you want to be. And to do that, you're going to have to take certain steps. And if you don't want to do it, I can't force you, but I keep reminding them that this is their goal, not mine.
Right. Yeah. And that makes a big difference. And it's amazing to me. Well, first of all, as a little on your family business comment, I've had a couple of episodes in the last, probably 20 episodes on folks that actually focus in family business. And I am always, unbelievably impressed. And also at the same time, just, feel bad in some ways for these folks because that is a tough road. And, I've got, Lori Bachman on, and then I had a couple of folks, a couple of these amazing sisters who were on, who do it a lot in Europe and the Middle East. And they have a lot of reasons. So in any case, but so folks can look back over the last, they want to see, about that. And there are these unique, things, right in there. And one of the things that they did talk about is the fact that not every family member is meant to work in the business, right? They may inherit an ownership, piece, and there's things about learning how to be a good owner, even if you're not in the business, and all those dynamics.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
In terms of this sort of, dichotomy of people who, take that action, whatever, it's so important because I see folks, folks come to me sometimes and they haven't done any of that work. Right. And they want to get X, for their company. And, I'm not a valuation guy, but in some of the industries I work in, I know the multiples, I know, generally what, and I can read a financial statement and, I can look sometimes and say, you're not going to get that, or they go out and get a valuation, or they just, have the company on the market and they're getting, offers at, half or, 60% or whatever of what they want. and and listen, ultimately the market's going to tell you what your company's worth, right?
Right.
And then they get insulted because some of them like, well, I have 25 years into this business. Well, that doesn't, the buyer doesn't care whether you have 20.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the only thing that gives you possibly is some history and name recognition, which gives some value, but the amount of hours you worked and how long it took you to build it are, not highly relevant
No.
to the buyer's valuation.
Nobody you anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I see people who, and then, a lot of times, they get a rude awakening, then they got to pull the company off the market, then they got to spend 3 years, plus in doing what they should have done in the first place, right?
Right. I tell you should be planning 3 to 5 years before you transition. You got to show the historicals. You got to show the fact that you're expendable. There's a lot of work goes into that. And how often do you see that? Not very often.
Right. So talk to me about some of the elements, right? Obviously, I'm sure it involves team, it involves systems, it involves mindset shifts, so you tell me, because, you talk about one of the things that distinguishes you is that you are not just looking at one aspect of it, right? You're looking at it holistically. So what are the various buckets, that companies need to look at to get it right?
Several common things I look at. Okay. Lack of process, or they have process not being followed because processes aren't solid and everybody's going around it. Lack of KPIs, they're managing off the P&L, so they're slow to react, so they're constantly putting out fires. Communications is a huge issue everywhere I go. Communications and leadership. How often CEOs that founded a company go down to the factory floor and talk to people? Myself, when I started my company, I had 8 employees. When I finished, I had 550 in Memphis and 120 in Europe. I didn't know everybody, but I did make it a point to go talk to them, because I want them to know I'm there and I want to know what they're thinking. Just the biggest thing I see is the employees today are a little different than old guys like me. I mean, we were expected to go to work and not be necessarily happy to do your job. That's not the same today. And people want to know what their expectations are, and they want to know that the expectations aren't changing. And if you don't have a strategy, and I've seen this a lot, is the expectations change by day.
Yeah.
So it frustrates them, and the turnover goes up, and that kind of thing. So it all gets back down to me to having a vision, strategy, some core values. And I know that sounds old-fashioned, but that's what's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. And listen, there are many people who I know who speak specifically on the difference of managing different generations of of folks or whatever, and of course that could be a little, people make blanket statements that aren't necessarily true. But having said that, there are sort of different, like the joke I think about is nowadays a lot of folks value additional time off, right, as a perk, right, and I think back to my grandfather. And it's probably true in my day too, but I specifically think about my grandfather because my grandfather's a guy that was a sanitation worker, right? In his day, they called him a garbage man. For 20 years, he retired out of the city, and then he went to work for IBM in a call center. And like for him, being in an office, like and having an office job was like huge. And he put in like another 20 there and retired with the gold watch, right? And and for him, if somebody said to him, "Oh, Albert, you did a great job. I'm going to give you some additional time off," he would look at them like they were nuts.
Yeah.
Like, are you trying to fire me? Like, did I do something wrong? Like, like that would not be seen as a perk. That would worry him. Like, you wouldn't even, consider.
I grew up in a coal mining town. Okay. I mean, my granddad worked in the mines, and the mines was less than a quarter mile off my house. And he'd come home from work at night, and by 5 o'clock, he'd tell me to ride my bike over the mine to see if the light was red or green. Because if the light was red, he didn't work the next day. If the light was green, he worked.
Right.
And, I remember that. I mean, going to work was important, So my mindset, I grew up with that. And now you're right. People want a life, a more balanced life probably than I had or you had, because we're maybe not as bright as they were. But the thing about that is social media. If you've got a bad reputation with your employees, everybody knows it. That's what gets back to core values. Core values used to be kind of a soft thing, or integrity, whatever. But you better have that today because you can't attract and retain people, and you gotta live that. And that's something it took me a while to learn dealing with companies. I'm saying that's a problem. It's a leadership thing because they don't, they'll treat people differently. Well, you can't do that today. In the old days, okay, as long as he's not on my back today, I'm fine. Right? But that's not the way it works today because it gets out. So
Yeah.
It's really funny because they talk about technology and they talk about automation, and the problems I see are really blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
You're not making the most of what you have. I just wrote an article for something about big companies, manufacturing companies can afford to automate, which they can. I just watched a video of a BMW factory in Germany. It was really awesome, but there were no people in the paint shop. I mean, it was crazy.
Right.
But a smaller company can't do that. So to reduce cost, what can they do? They can manage their processes. They can look at their costs and they can manage them as close as they can. And to do that, you got to have KPIs. You got to have some kind of measurement in place. You got to watch it. Automation isn't, most of the manufacturers I dealt with, they can't automate that much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. And it's, yeah. And listen, it's funny because in any, business coaches, business growth courses, any, you read whatever. I mean, having KPIs, having those key performance indicators that are, and also, one of the mistakes that companies make is they only look at lagging, right? Not leading, indicators, right? So yeah, they only find out about stuff like even if they're getting proper reporting, which on the lagging indicators, which is not always the case, right? Even if they are getting proper reporting on the lagging indicators, by the time they see it, it's, they're in trouble. It's not too late or they're going to dig themselves out.
Get down. You're right. I mean, there's no trending, no nothing. And it's the reason I bring it out. It's not like it's one company. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's the vast majority, at least the ones I've seen.
Yeah.
It's strictly off P&L. P&L is maybe 6 weeks after the problem happens.
Right.
What do you do with it?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting. And then, so I was, you said you start with the CEO, which makes sense. And then I'm assuming you move to the leadership team, from there.
That's the way it works. Yeah. And part of that is I learn a lot there because I'll watch if they defer to the CEO. When we start talking about strengths and weaknesses, and I'll see if there's agreement or any pushback. And if there isn't, then my job is to get the dialogue going, because you don't want a one-man plan.
Yeah.
A one-lady plan, whatever it is, a one-person plan. You want buy-in, you want cross-pollination of the planning. And, I'll watch that. If it's not happening, I'll get it out.
Yeah. And, and it's interesting how that comes back up to the CEO, right? Because he or she is the one who created that culture, is either open and encourages, people or wants a lot of yes people around them. And that's, that's the biggest mistake. I mean, it's, people are sometimes like, I've been driving, let's say in my car with a business colleague of mine, or like, somebody, a friend of mine owns another company. And he'll sometimes hear my people, if I'm calling with them, like really pushing back, on me. And I'm like, that's the way I want it. Like I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's my assistant, my reception, whatever. If they see something and they listen, ultimately, obviously, the buck stops here, and I'm gonna make a decision. And if I disagree with them, I'm gonna take it into account. I'm gonna also explain it to them, appreciate them, whatever. But much more often, if they're feeling strongly about something, it's, there's something for me to look at,
Exactly. I mean, I can't see everything. When I was with the company I had, I wanted input. If I doesn't get it, I was frustrated. I used to say, if I got to do your job, I'll take your paycheck back. I'll tell you what's going on.
So I know, obviously, you work in different industries, although it's, a lot in manufacturing, logistics, that kind of stuff. I mean, do you have a feel on like the difference in magnitude of value that companies get, that figure this out, that do it really well, versus the companies that don't do well in terms of, processes and systemizing and having them be less dependent upon the founder, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think I do by industry. I mean, it varies by industry.
Sure.
But a lot of it is depends on repeatability and whether I need you or not.
Yeah.
If I can bring in a manager and see the same results, that's creates value.
Yeah.
Because I know, unless you have an earn out, I know once we own the business, your head's not in it anymore, right? So
Right.
the earnout is critical. So then you're going to cut corners to get the earnout. So I mean, it's not an ideal situation for either side.
Yeah, and have you? I mean, I don't know if you've seen stats or just experiences in some of the industries you're in on, how, because I mean, for me in the areas that I'm in, well, first of all, it could be the difference between being able to sell the company and not. Let's start there, like being able to do any deal and not doing a deal. But then, I mean, I've seen differences of sometimes, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, like the value, I mean,
Right.
more, like you're not talking about a 10 or 20% valuation difference. You're talking about multiples often.
Absolutely. There was a book written a while back by, I think his name was David Thompson, Blueprint to a Billion. I don't know if you ever read that.
I haven't.
We did a study on companies' valuations of everybody that went public since 1984. And how many, I can't remember the exact numbers, and I apologize because I used to use it a lot, but how many reached $1 billion?
Yeah.
There were 7 steps that each company that had at least 5 of those 7 steps that hit $1 billion. And it was only like 100 something. I mean, wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
But it talked about being able to attract marquee customers, having a strong value proposition, repeatability. I mean, all the things we're talking about. So the data is there. Having marquee customers that you got relationships with brings you money.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to get a marquee customer, you got to offer some kind of value that they don't have, right?
Right.
I had a customer. I'll give you an example. I don't want to use names, but I had a client that was in a very competitive commodity business. There was actually a lot of technical research went into the product, and his strength was technical. I mean, his strength, he was good at it.
Yeah.
And I asked him when we went through the planning process, I said, you're doing all this technical work, but you're still competing on price with your competitors. And the competitor in this industry was a big company from Europe that was buying up all the independents. So they were forcing price down on all the independents. So I said, you're incurring the cost. You've got a great reputation, but you're not going to get paid for it. So what we decided was he wasn't going to be the manufacturer anymore. He was going to be an R&D company that could manufacture. And what that allowed him to do, instead of selling to purchasing over time, it took about 2 years, was to sell engineering. The engineering had a problem. They'd come to him and they'd say, yeah, I can do that. And then they'd spec his product back through manufacturing. And that worked out really great for him. He got some major deals with oil companies, major oil company, that he went and got the other way. They've gone with a big name. And he's not a big company. Yeah. So it's just a way of thinking that says, what can I do that's different in my industry? What am I good at? And how can I exploit that? In his case, it worked perfectly. He was willing to take that risk. So, hats off to him.
Yeah, it's amazing. And listen, we're in a day and age where more and more businesses are becoming commoditized, right? It's easier for a business to be commoditized. So having that, differentiator, has become, even more important. It's just the way markets are becoming more efficient with the internet and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of reasons that have margin compression in various industries. And it's true, in, everything from manufacturing to professional services and consulting and whatever. I mean, so having that, having that differentiator is a crucial thing. One of the things that you sort of alluded to, but it was more of a direct, deal with the Amex thing back then, is, I think one of the underutilized concepts in some areas, right? There are areas where channel partner type deals are done all the time, right? Where you don't deal with the end client, or at least not directly, but you get brought in by a channel partner, and maybe there's some economic split. And I've always been a big believer that concept can be applied to many, many industries, even if you don't have. I mean, I'll just give an example with me. I have one of my niches. We do a lot with tech companies and other companies or whatever. We've done deals, you name it, manufacturing, restaurants, licensing, whatever. But we have this niche in financial services, and we work with a lot of investment advisor firms. We have enough of a reputation now in referrals, and even just because the content we put out, we get direct stuff. But we still probably get 80% of our business from a handful of referral sources. They're not truly channel partners because as a lawyer, I can't pay them. I can't split fees with them. Right. But we built relationships with the custodians, the Schwabs, the Fidelities, the TDs, with the recruiters, in the industry, with the investment bankers in the industry on the M&A side, and they're usually, especially the custodians, because the custodians have salespeople, like business development offices, that are calling upon these investment advisors at Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley and UBS, and to get them, Goldman Sachs, wherever, to get them to go independent and start their own firm. And they'll call on these folks for years, right? And then they're much earlier in the process. At some point, when they make a decision to leave, they need legal help, right? So so for me, I've effectively have a indirect, unpaid to me, no cost to me sales force, essentially indirectly working for me, because they're working for Schwab or Fidelity or TD, whatever. They get these guys to go, and women to go independent. Then they need legal work to get them out of where they are, set up their own firm, whatever. And they're saying, go use Kupfer, right? And I know in manufacturing and distribution, those types of deals are pretty common, depending upon, and certainly in tech. So, any experience with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of one when you were talking. But yeah, I mean, it's always a resource. A lot of founders that I see have relationships from their past life.
Yeah.
The problem with that is they're aged.
Right.
So once those people move on, then it becomes obsolete, right? So I'm trying to think of one I like myself. I'll give you an example myself. A lot of my referrals come from banks that I knew in the past. I had a bank. I wrote a book a few years ago, a couple of books actually, but one of them I gave to a banker buddy of mine, and he read it, and he bought copies for all his branch managers. Then he had me come in and do a one-day seminar for his branch managers. And then he set up 14 of his clients. Once a month, I'd meet with him to go through the book with his clients, his business clients.
Right.
So, that's a kind of, I see that happening. I'm trying to think of with clients, one in particular, he's got some civic interest.
Yep.
And because of the civic interest, he's in industrial service. I mean, he's locked into that market. With the same thing, people that are property managers, maybe that don't have anything to do with his realm, are still referring him. So yeah, you use that. Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Any before we get to the final two questions, any last thoughts, things you want to leave the audience with about deals, about preparing, so anything? Any last thoughts?
It's a great way to grow a business. I mean, my business made the Inc. 500 back in the 7th year, and it's because of the strategic partnerships. In Europe, we partnered with HP and handled all the returns for Western Europe. We actually co-located in the building with them. Wow. And I took 80 people from HP into my company. So it established me in Europe. And you get established in Europe with HP, you're established.
Yes.
So, I mean, you got to look for opportunities, I think, to do that. And to do that, you got to bring some value to the table.
Love it. So listen, I'm sure that the audience has gotten major value from this, Martin. I appreciate you coming on. If people want to find out more about your services and what you do, what's the best place for them to go?
MartinHarshberger.com.
There you go. MartinHarshberger.com. HARSHBERGER, right? Harshberger. That'll be in the show notes, folks. So if you're driving or whatever, don't worry about it. You can pick it up in the show notes. Definitely check out Martin's work. He does a lot of great work with so many companies, and you hear his background and experience that he brings to the table. So Martin, my last question on the podcast is, freedom is my highest single ideal in life, value in life. And that means, freedom for all people around the world to live the kind of lives they want to live and not be oppressed, to the reason I'm an entrepreneur, and I haven't had a boss, and except for my clients, of course, I haven't had a boss in 30 years. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it apply in your life and business? Well,
there's several types right now. If you look at what's going on in the country, freedom of speech is a concern. But I mean, financial freedom. To me, it's doing what I like to do. I mean, I'm in my 70s, and I've retired twice. I can't take it. I mean, I got to stay busy, and to me, that's freedom, because I don't have to do it, but I do it. So I do it because I enjoy it. So that's kind of freedom, I guess.
Love it, Martin. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.